They flew me out to Cradle Station on a supply rotor because the regular translators had already come and gone, and none of them had gotten so much as a flicker out of the thing in the vault. I want to be honest about that, since honesty matters in a story like this. I wasn't the best linguist the compact had. I wasn't even in the top 20. I was the one who happened to be free that week. And free was cheap. And cheap was what a dying listening post on a dying budget could afford. Cradle Station sits in a cliff, on a coast nobody visits anymore. Poured concrete and old steel gone soft with rust. Built back when the compact still believed the silence overhead might break again, and they'd need ears pointed at the sky. Down under the bunkers, cut into the rock itself, there's an older chamber that the concrete was built around rather than into. Walls of pale stone that isn't stone, shelved floor to ceiling with things that aren't quite books. Scrolls, tablets, spools of something like glass thread, all of it dead and dark since before anyone alive was born. In the center of the room, on a pedestal that never gathered dust the way everything around it did, sits the codex. Nobody I ever met had opened it, not for lack of trying. 200 years of scholars, then 30 years of machines, and the codex answered every one of them the same way, not at all. It didn't refuse loudly, it didn't glow red or lock itself down. It simply sat there, closed, patient in a way that started to feel less like an object and more like someone waiting for a particular knock at a particular door. The station commander, a heavy-set man named Aldrich Voss who'd run Cradle for 11 years, walked me down on my first morning and gave me the honest version nobody puts in the briefing packet. 41 translators before me. 6 linguistic AIs, the good kind, the kind that can reconstruct a dead tongue from one broken tablet inside a week. All 47 had failed the same way. Not with error messages, not with garbled output, but with nothing. The codex simply declined to notice they existed. Voss told me this the way a man tells you about a dog that's bitten everyone who's reached for it, half warning and half daring me to try anyway. He didn't think I'd do any better, and was too tired and too honest to pretend otherwise. I was given 4 days and a folding chair. I spent the first 2 of them doing what everyone before me had done, running the known fragments through comparative grammar, trying stress patterns, trying silence, trying to touch the cover in the 60 ways the old reports suggested touching it. The room stayed exactly as dead as it had been for 2,000 years. On the 3rd day I stopped working like a linguist and started just sitting with it, the way you'd sit with somebody grieving, not expecting to fix anything, just present. That's when I caught myself humming. It wasn't anything I chose. It was a lullaby my grandmother used to sing when I was small enough to be carried. A string of sounds she told me were the old words, passed to her by her mother, who'd gotten them from a grandmother further back than anyone kept track of. I'd always assumed it was nonsense, family nonsense, the kind every family has, a rhyme with no meaning left in it, kept alive out of love rather than sense. I'd sung it to nobody in 30 years. I didn't even know I still had it in me, until it came out sideways, halfway between a hum and words, aimed at nothing but the quiet. The pedestal light changed. It wasn't dramatic. That's the part I need people to understand, because when this gets told back to me later, it always gets dramatic. And it wasn't. One thin line down the spine of the codex went from the flat gray it had always been, to a color I don't have a clean word for. Not gold exactly, more like gold remembered after a long time in the dark. I stopped humming out of pure animal surprise, and the line dimmed halfway back down, patient again, waiting. So I sang it again. All the way through this time, the way she taught me, not caring how it sounded, not caring that I was a grown woman alone in a stone room, singing her dead grandmother's lullaby to a 2,000-year-old book. The cover opened on its own, slow, the way a hand opens when it finally decides to trust you. Inside, the pages weren't pages. They were folded light, layer under layer, and as the lullaby ran its course, the light began arranging itself into shapes I understood the way you understand your own name. Not translated, just known. I want to be clear, I hadn't studied this. I couldn't have told you 5 minutes earlier that I knew a single one of these marks, but my mouth kept shaping the old words, and my mind kept receiving their meaning at the exact same moment, like two ends of a very long-buried wire finally touching. The codex began to speak back, not in sound, in understanding, direct and total, the kind that arrives fully formed instead of word by word. It told me, showed me, that the old alliance hadn't fallen the way the histories guessed. It hadn't been conquered. It had scattered on purpose, in the last hard years of a war I'll never have the full shape of, seeding its founding families across 100 worlds, so that no single strike could end what they'd built. Each family was given one unbreakable thing to carry forward, that no invader could steal or copy. Not a weapon, not a code, but a song, a password worn as love, something a mother would still be singing to a child, long after every other record had rotted, long after the reason for it had been forgotten by everyone, except the ones still humming it. I sat on that cold floor, and understood, all at once, that my grandmother hadn't been keeping nonsense alive. She'd been keeping a key. The gold light climbed off the pages and gathered into a shape near the height of a person, faceless, made of nothing but that same remembered gold, and it didn't ask me who I was. It already knew. It simply said the thing it had been built, across 2,000 years of silence, to say to whoever finally walked in, already carrying the right song in their mouth. The tongue remembers you, founder. I didn't feel like a founder. I felt like a tired woman on a folding chair contract who'd gotten lucky with a hum. But the room didn't care what I felt like. Shelf after shelf around me began to wake in sympathy, faint light rising off the older tablets, the glass thread spools stirring like something breathing after holding its breath a very long time. Whatever this place had been built to do, it had been waiting specifically for this. Not for a scholar, not for a machine, but for one more voice, in an unbroken line, however thin that line had worn. I called it in on the station channel eventually, because that's the job, because Cradle Station needed to know what had woken under their floor. But I sat there a long while first, alone with the gold light and the open codex, running my grandmother's lullaby through my head one more time, hearing it now for what it had always actually been. Not a bedtime rhyme handed down out of habit, but a promise somebody 2,000 years dead had trusted a line of ordinary mothers to keep, one small hum at a time, until it finally reached a room that had been waiting the whole time to hear it. Voss came down eventually, drawn by the light bleeding up through the old vents, and stood in the doorway a long moment without speaking. I watched him take in the shelves stirring around us, the pedestal, me sitting on the cold floor like I'd been struck by something and hadn't finished falling. He didn't ask what happened. He just asked, quietly, whether I was all right, and I told him the truth, that I didn't know yet, and might not for years. He nodded, like that was the only honest answer available, and told the channel upstairs only that the vault had opened, leaving the rest for me to explain, once I had words steady enough for it. I called my mother that night on the station's cracked satellite line, meaning to break the news carefully. Instead, I just sang the lullaby down the line, start to finish, my voice shaking on the last note. There was a long silence. Then she said, quietly, that her own grandmother used to cry when she sang it, and neither of them had ever known why, only that you didn't stop. You kept it going because someone before you had asked you to, and that had always been reason enough. I'm not the person the compact will want for what comes next. I'm not a soldier, not a diplomat, not anyone built for the weight a word like founder is about to put on my shoulders. But the codex didn't open for the best linguist they had, or anyone the reports would have picked first. It opened for the one who still remembered the words nobody thought mattered, sung to her by a woman who never knew what she was really keeping alive. That, as far as I can tell, was the entire point of a lullaby like that one. Not comfort, though it gave that too, but a door, built to open for exactly one kind of hand, however long it took that hand to knock.